I am standing in my mother-in-law's driveway, shivering despite the humid afternoon air. I am still wearing my hospital sweatpants, the ones with the faded logo on the hip. Every breath I take feels like a sharp tug against the fresh stitches in my side. I had surgery only 3 days ago to manage the physical aftermath of a miscarriage that nearly took my life. In my left hand, I am clutching a small, battered suitcase that contains the only things I could grab in 10 minutes. My husband, John, stands a few feet away, his back to me as he locks the front door of the house we shared. His mother, Vivian, stands on the porch like a stone statue. Her arms are crossed tightly over her expensive silk blouse. She looks at me not with pity, but with a cold, clinical disgust. She tells me that I am too much of a burden right now for her son to handle. She says the family cannot afford to carry dead weight, while I am grieving and unemployed. John finally turns around, but he won't meet my eyes. He just mutters that his mother is right and that I need space to figure myself out. The porch light clicks off, and I am left in the dark. The rideshare car smells like stale peppermint and old upholstery. I sit in the back seat, my body aching, and pull out my phone to check our joint bank account. I just wanted to see if I had enough to cover a few nights at a cheap motel before heading to my sister Blossom's house. When the app loads, my heart stops. The balance doesn't say low. It doesn't even say 0. It shows a series of dashes where the numbers used to be. Every single cent is gone. Exactly $42,000 has been drained in a single lump sum transfer. This was money I built through years of extra freelance shifts and my hard-earned severance pay. It was our safety net, the fund I insisted we keep for emergencies. I call John immediately, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. He answers on the third ring, his voice calm and detached, as if he is reading from a script written by his mother. He tells me I am not stable right now and that Vivian thinks the money is safer in an account under his name only. I realize at that moment that I am being erased from my own life. They didn't just kick me out. They robbed me. I spend the first night at Blossom's house crying into a pillow, but by morning, the grief turns into a cold, hard lump of iron in my chest. Blossom sits with me at her kitchen table, pushing a cup of tea toward me, but I am already typing on my laptop. John and Vivian think I am a broken woman with no resources. They forgot one very important thing. I am a paralegal by trade, and I never enter a contract without a backup plan. Before we got married, John almost lost his entire inheritance to one of Vivian's guaranteed real estate scams. To protect our future, I made him sign a post-nuptial agreement. He laughed when he signed it, calling me too cautious, and he likely hasn't thought about it since the day the ink dried. I log into my private cloud storage and pull up the PDF. There it is, the financial misconduct clause. It states that if either spouse hides, transfers, or dissipates joint assets in bad faith, they forfeit their share of the marital home. I forward the document to a senior partner at my old firm. I also found the routing number for the transfer. It went to an LLC called V-Star Holdings. V-Star Holdings was a name I recognized from the countless nights I spent doing the taxes for the family. Vivian always claimed her family investment firm was on the brink of failure. She used that excuse for years to guilt us into paying her bills. Because she was struggling, I was the one who paid 80% of the mortgage on our house. Because she was in trouble, John told me we couldn't afford the fertility treatments I so desperately wanted. I started digging through public property records and corporate filings. Within 2 hours, I found out the truth. V-Star Holdings isn't failing. It is expanding. The $42,000 they stole from me was the exact down payment amount for a new commercial storefront downtown. Vivian wasn't a struggling grandmother. She was an aspiring mogul building an empire using my sweat and my tears as capital. I feel a wave of nausea. Every sacrifice I made for 3 years was actually a donation to her secret business. My lawyer called me back 10 minutes later. Her voice is sharp. She tells me the paperwork is a goldmine of illegal activity and that I have them backed into a corner. My lawyer, a woman who doesn't believe in losing, explains the situation. The transfer to the LLC is a clear violation of the post-nup. If I file for divorce and a temporary restraining order on the assets right now, I can freeze every account Vivian owns. However, there is a catch. If I move too fast, Vivian will hide the remaining paper trail or claim it was a gift from John. We need more than just the bank statement. We need proof of intent. My lawyer suggests I play a dangerous game. They think I am weak, emotional, and desperate. I need to lean into that. I need to make them believe I am so broken that I will accept any crumb of kindness they offer. I take a deep breath, clutching the phone until my knuckles turn white. I call John. I make my voice go up an octave, letting it tremble and crack. I tell him I can't survive at Blossoms. I tell him I'm scared and that I'm sorry for being a burden. I beg him to let me come home, even if it's just to sleep in the guest room. When I pull back into the driveway, Vivian is waiting on the porch like a warden. She greets me with a smirk that she tries to hide behind a mask of concern. She treats me like a stray dog she is reluctantly allowing back into the house for a few days. She sits me down at the kitchen table and lays out the ground rules for my probation. I am not allowed to discuss the money. I am not allowed to stress John with my moods or my grief. I am expected to attend family dinners, cook, clean, and act grateful for their charity. I nod my head like a submissive child. I apologize for my outburst about the bank account. Behind my eyes, I am a different person. Every time I clean the office, I am actually scanning documents. Every time I cook dinner, I am listening to their conversations through the vents. One night, while I am supposed to be asleep, I hear Vivian's voice drifting up from the kitchen. She tells John that the refinance is almost complete. She says, once the house is fully in your name, we won't need her at all. We can finally cut the cord. The next morning, I wait for John and Vivian to leave for a business lunch. As soon as their cars clear the driveway, I sprint to the mailbox. Inside is a thick envelope from a local credit union. It is the refinance paperwork for our home. I take it to the kitchen counter and start flipping through the pages. My heart begins to hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. John's name is listed as the sole owner. My name is nowhere to be found on the new title. But then I get to the signature page. To remove a spouse from a deed in this state, both parties must sign in the presence of a notary. I look at the line where my name is printed. Next to it is a signature that looks remarkably like mine, but the S is too looped and the A is too flat. They didn't just try to trick me, they committed a felony. They forged my name to steal the equity in the house. Equity that I built with my own salary while John was finding himself. I pull out my phone and take high-resolution photos of every single page. I don't scream. I don't throw the papers across the room. I put them back in the envelope and place it exactly as I found it in the mailbox. Then, I drove to the bank listed on the letterhead. I ask for the manager and present my ID. I request the signature verification records and the notary's log for the refinance application. The banker looks at the screen, then at me, and then back at the screen. He looks deeply uncomfortable. He confirms that the signature on the digital file does not match the signature on my original account opening documents from 5 years ago. He also notes that the notary used was a private one, not a bank employee. I request certified copies of the discrepancy report. As I walk out to the parking lot, I call my lawyer. I am shaking, but it's not from fear anymore. It's from adrenaline. I told her about the forgery. She stays silent for a long moment before saying one word. Felony. She tells me to stay calm and stay in the house for 2 more days. She says we need one more event to seal their fate. That Saturday, Vivian decided to throw a lavish dinner party to celebrate her new commercial acquisition. She invited the neighbors, a few local business owners, and her high-end investment partners. She spent the entire afternoon ordering me around, making me polish silver and set the table for 12. She bought expensive champagne and had a catering company bring in the main course. During the meal, she stood up at the head of the table, looking like the queen of her own small world. She made a toast to fresh starts and the importance of cutting out toxic influences that hold back success. The guests all clapped and cheered. John reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. It wasn't a gesture of love, it was a physical warning to keep my mouth shut and keep smiling. I looked around the room at the people who thought Vivian was a pillar of the community. I stood up, my glass raised. I thanked Vivian for teaching me the value of documentation and showing me what people are truly capable of. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she just laughed it off as a sweet sentiment. The climax of the dinner was interrupted by the shrill ringing of Vivian's phone. She tried to ignore it at first, but it rang 3 times in a row. She stepped into the hallway to answer it, her voice sounding annoyed. A minute later, she walked back into the dining room, and her face was the color of old parchment. She looked like she had seen a ghost. She whispered something to John, her hands trembling. Her business accounts and the V-Star Holdings LLC account had been temporarily frozen pending a fraud investigation. She turned her eyes toward me, her pupils pin-sized with rage. She hissed, asking me what I had done. I sat back in my chair, picked up a piece of expensive cheese, and looked her dead in the eye. I didn't whisper. I said it loud enough for the entire table to hear. I protected myself from a thief. The neighbors stopped eating. The business partners looked at each other in confusion. John demanded to know what I was talking about. I told him that the bank called me about the forged refinance papers. The cracks in their perfect family facade were finally visible to the world. The next morning, the investigation became very real when a detective from the white-collar crime unit arrived at the front door. He requested separate interviews with Vivian, John, and myself. I gave him my certified copies from the bank, the post-nuptial agreement, and the photos of the forged documents. I also showed him the email trail I had uncovered where Vivian explicitly told John to handle the signature, so they wouldn't have to pay me out. Vivian tried to play the victim, claiming it was a clerical error and a family misunderstanding. John tried to claim he had no idea his mother had forged anything, but the detective wasn't interested in their excuses. He mentioned that asset concealment and financial coercion were serious charges, especially when involving a forged legal deed. In a moment of pure cowardice, Vivian finally snapped at her son right in front of the detective. She yelled, "You told me she was too weak to fight back. You said she was broken." I watched John's face crumble. For the first time, he realized that I wasn't the victim in this story anymore. When the police finally left, the house felt like a pressure cooker. John exploded in a fit of rage I had never seen before. He called me vindictive and heartless. He screamed that I had ruined his mother's life and destroyed the family business. He paced the living room, throwing his hands in the air, acting like I was the villain for not letting them rob me in silence. I waited for him to stop. I waited until he was out of breath. Then, I spoke in a voice so quiet it made him stop moving. I reminded him of the night he left me bleeding and grieving in a driveway because his mother told him I was dead weight. I reminded him that he had stolen my life savings while I was recovering from surgery. The room went dead silent. For a second, a flicker of shame crossed his face, but I didn't care about his regret. I reached into my bag and handed him the divorce papers. He started to laugh, thinking he could still bully me, until he turned to the page listing the asset claims. He realized I wasn't just asking for half. I was taking everything the law allowed. The following weeks were a slow-motion collapse for the V-Star empire. Because the refinance was flagged as fraudulent, the lender immediately pulled the funding and triggered a bad faith clause that cost them thousands in penalties. Because of the post-nup, John's attempt to hide the $42,000 meant he forfeited his primary equity in our home. Vivian's business partners, terrified of being linked to a fraud investigation, began pulling their investments one by one. Her empire was built on a house of cards, and I had pulled the bottom one out. She called me dozens of times, her voice shifting from threats to begging. She offered to settle quietly and give me back the original money if I would just tell the bank it was a mistake. I didn't even respond. I let my lawyer do the talking. We made it clear that the only way this would end without a prison cell for forgery was if they met my absolute demands. They had no leverage left. They were cornered by their own greed. I sat in a glass-walled conference room across from John and Vivian for the final signing. Vivian looked like she had aged 10 years in a month. I laid out my final conditions: a full buyout of my equity in the house at its highest appraised value, a public written admission of financial misconduct to clear my credit, and a massive settlement from the LLC for the misappropriated funds. I also demanded that John attend court-ordered therapy for domestic financial abuse. Vivian sputtered, her face turning a deep purple, but John just stared at the table. He knew that if he didn't sign, the detective would move forward with the felony forgery charges. He signed the papers with a shaking hand. For the first time in his life, he didn't look at his mother for permission. He looked at me, and I saw a mixture of fear and realization. I walked out of that office not with a suitcase of old clothes, but with a cashier's check that secured my entire future. I was finally free. 6 months later, I heard through the grapevine that V-Star Holdings had officially dissolved. Vivian had to sell her commercial empire at a massive loss just to pay off the legal fees and the disgruntled investors. But here is the part they never saw coming. I was the one who bought the building. Through a private investment group my lawyer helped me set up, I purchased the very storefront Vivian had used my stolen money to secure. I turned it into a non-profit financial advocacy center for women who are trapped in economically abusive marriages. I teach them how to check their credit, how to protect their assets, and how to spot the signs of a Vivian before it's too late. The last message I ever got from John was a text saying, "Mom says you destroyed this family." I didn't even type a reply. I just blocked the number. Families don't abandon you in a driveway at your lowest point. I didn't destroy a family. I dismantled a predatory business. And as I sit in my new office, looking at the life I built from the ashes, I know that the quiet woman in the sweatpants was never the victim. She was the one with the plan.